our cities, our factories, our food production. As our population increases, so does our footprint.
The environment is a very complex system, whether we're talking about a natural environment or a city. There's tremendous variability over time and from place to place. So we have to understand that complexity to be able to manage the environment in ways that sustain our society. One of the successful programs that help us understand that complexity is the Long-Term Ecological Research Program.
The LTER network began with funding from the National Science Foundation in 1980. The strategic approach used by the LTER program is helping transform science. Scientists collect data on larger scales, over decades, in natural and urban environments. They compare information across regional and national boundaries. Interdisciplinary and cross-site collaborations are enhanced with satellite and supercomputer data support for a more comprehensive understanding of the environment. This research contributes to a scientific basis for ecosystem-based management. Consider what happens when silt from development ends up in streams, or when too much phosphorus and nitrogen from upstream urban and agricultural areas move into the surface and groundwater. One example studied by the Wisconsin LTER is Lake Mendota. Those extra nutrients fertilize the lake. Algae flourishes. When it dies and decays, it robs the lake of oxygen. Unhealthy ecosystems can diminish recreational use. The prize catch will decrease when water temperature, cloudiness, nutrients, and chemicals increase. Those conditions have environmental and economic consequences.
Source water quality is very important to the drinking water industry. 10 years ago, the Water Authority experienced a plankton outbreak in our source water. This outbreak cost the authority over $250,000.
Nature tries to clean up pollution. LTER studies help us understand how we assist or hinder this process. In Oregon, researchers at the Andrews Experimental Forest Site identified some of the benefits of old-growth forests. They store more carbon. By slowing the release of carbon back into the atmosphere, they are a safeguard against rapid global warming. In summer, they use less water than young forests do, so there's more water in streams.
If the small streams are able to remove nitrogen from the water, then it's nature is providing a service for us that we don't have to pay for by using something that is built by humans in order to specifically remove this pollutant from the water.
An LTER project called LINKS has been collecting data for a decade from 20 streams across the United States. The research helps us understand just how these streams clean their water for us if we protect them. Another LTER site in Michigan is researching alternate farming practices, ways to minimize pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizers, increasing crop productivity with biological instead of chemical strategies. For example, the Kellogg LTER demonstrated how poplar trees provide a habitat for helpful insects. They help farmers understand how weeds provide food and cover for beneficial insects, and even capture nutrients otherwise lost from cropland.
The nature of these long-term studies allow researchers to build on decades of data, decades of information that help characterize how variable this environment is.
Sometimes it explains the variability. In New Hampshire, Hubbard Brook researchers used precipitation and stream chemistry data to identify the acid rain phenomenon. Air pollutants from burning fossil fuels decreased the pH of rainfall. The increased acidity of the rain changed stream and soil chemistry, damaging the ecosystem.
The data may be as simple as measurements, but they also can be tissues that are archived, collections that are maintained to be studied by others.
Decades of data on small mammal research at the Cebolleta LTER in New Mexico were available to help the Centers for Disease Control identify the source of a deadly virus in the early 90s. The hantavirus, harmless in the rodent population, was deadly to humans. What changed? The weather. More rain, more food, more rodents, and more contact with humans. Understanding the problem allowed communities to devise solutions that ended the regional public health crisis. Beyond a regional scope, scientists understand the need for a global perspective. Pollution crosses political boundaries. So areas without local factories, farms, or mines still suffer from pollution generated hundreds, even thousands of miles away. The climate is changing. We know some of its impact, like the receding glaciers in Alaska. LTER projects in Fairbanks and in the Arctic measure the decrease in the permafrost layers. But what may be the impact in other places, like the world's oceans? In the Antarctic, researchers are finding an increase in algae caused by warmer temperatures. In the South Pacific, another LTER site tracks the effects on coral reefs. Prolonged warming sets off a chain of events leading to the death of an entire ecosystem and the subsequent collapse of the fisheries it supports. Another site off the California coast studies the currents to determine how ocean warming alters the plankton base for the food web.
The studies of these complex systems also require that many disciplines interact together. We need people that study the atmosphere, the soils, the water, so it's an interdisciplinary team that begins to understand this system.
In southern Appalachia, the cross-disciplinary COETA LTER team studies the forces that are transforming one of the most biodiverse regions in the U.S. Their research has redirected forest management practices. Cross-discipline research is especially important when we study urban environments.
When you're studying ecology in the city, it relates to engineering because you're dealing with built environment, it deals with architecture, planning, you deal with chemists, hydrologists, civil engineers, and social scientists.
This holistic approach, long-term and large-scale focus, may be the most important contributions of the LTER strategy. Modern science is now better equipped to support policy and management decisions. The Plum Island Estuary Site studies coastal Massachusetts to evaluate urban influences on the watershed and how water quality affects a coastal environment. Long-term forest research in the Pacific Northwest has benefited salmon recovery. In the Southwest, records from the Horonata and Sevieta LTER help us understand how grasslands turn into deserts and under what circumstances the process might be reversed. In the Midwest, fire is one of the essential ingredients to maintaining tallgrass prairies. Scientists at Kanza LTER have 30 years of data on the impacts of fire, weather patterns, and bison and cattle grazing. They are now researching important changes in regional land use and land cover, and the impact of predicted climate change on these grasslands.
The knowledge that we generate is critical, but we have to get that information, that knowledge, to policymakers and decision makers to effect the changes needed to protect these environments.
A competition for water resources was resolved near San Juan, Puerto Rico, with the help of long-term data on the Rio Maimaeus. A compromise on water withdrawal was possible because researchers knew how to maintain the shrimp habitat and the health of the river ecosystem. They helped managers determine how much water could be taken and how best to do it. The community was able to protect the environment and accommodate economic development. The Florida Everglades is a story in progress. Digging channels and building dams help provide the land for South Florida to support agriculture, tourism, and growth. That reduced the wetlands and the fresh water supply. Now land managers understand they must restore the protective wetlands, which increase the freshwater aquifer and protect it from saltwater intrusion. That's where scientists can help with long-term research and modeling.
We start with experiments in the field, then we integrate the data into a simulation model. That data helps us understand the system, and by understanding that system, we can then make forecasts about future responses to environmental change.
Models help generalize to broader scales and identify solutions. This is the kind of research that convinced federal and state governments to fund Everglades restoration. It is possible to protect and rebuild the natural environment for a sustainable South Florida.
Understanding these processes that occur across very large areas also require international approaches. And the LTER program has been very effective in creating similar kinds of programs in other countries around the world.
Taiwanese scientists do research in Puerto Rico to compare data on how forests recover after hurricanes, since forests protect the fresh water supply for people and the downstream environment. The Virginia LTER has collaborated with Brazilian researchers to study sea level rise and the impact of storms on the barrier islands. The LTER looks across boundaries and across generations. They help teachers make science more than classroom work. LTER schoolyard programs teach ecology to help students build a sense of place. They are a part of an ecosystem, and their decisions make a difference. This class in Baltimore is building a wetland behind their school. When it is complete, future classes will be able to track changes in the native plants and animals that will come to live there. As of 2006, there are 26 LTER programs across the United States involving over 1,000 scientists.
The strength of the science that comes from the LTER network is based on its ability to make connections. Connections across time, connections across space, connections across disciplines that integrates these efforts into a holistic approach.
This research strategy can help us understand how our activities affect the environment and how better management can protect it. We want our children and their children to inherit a world that's safe and sustainable. That's the challenge. That's the work of the LTER.
First of all, we have increased the carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere by 30% since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Secondly, we have transformed or changed between 1/2 and 2/3 of the entire land surface of the planet. Third, we are using more than half of the available surface fresh water on the planet. Fourth, we have doubled now the amount of nitrogen that is coming into the nitrogen cycle every year. We do that primarily by producing fertilizers. Fifth, we have caused the extinction of more than 1/4 of the bird species on this planet. And sixth, we are currently the major marine fisheries of the world. 2/3 of those are being fully exploited, overexploited, or depleted. That sum total tells us something extremely important. That is that humanity has now emerged as a major force of nature.